There's a question here. Sorry, I need to look for it in the number of questions we have about desalination. And let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, the question is what is the power consumption of the? Oh wait, no, sorry. Let me see here if I can find it for you. Um, Oh yeah, here it said, what are the prospects for desalination using MOFs? And I read a report recently that a university in Australia had promising results related to that. Is that something that might be a possibility?
Absolutely, absolutely, because you could have the moth in any kind of a humidity, and it would trap water. Okay, so yes, the results from Australia are very interesting, using MOFs for this application. And I think once you start thinking like a MOF chemist who's doing water harvesting, the number of applications are almost endless of what you can do once you know how to pluck out water from air.
And here's a question more about the MOF itself. So is there kind of any rule of thumb to the rationality of the design of the MOFs for water harvesting? And one person kind of added on, would you foresee kind of adjusting the MOF for different regionality differences?
Right. So again, very good question. Some people are working on devices that have more than one MOF for different regions of the world. Um, I think that, let's say, if you have a MOF that works down to 7% relative humidity, um, you may not want to operate that MOF under um, that humidity all year round under those, let's say, conditions. So you could design a MOF that is going to give you a lot more yield under a range of conditions, and therefore minimize your power requirements, your heating requirements, and so on. So yes, you could do that. We are not doing that in these prototypes, but potentially there will be varieties of devices that would have different MOFs for different regions of the world. And those different MOFs, by the way, exist. They are out there. They've been designed and they are being deployed for that purpose. I think the initial part of the question was about the design of the MOF. Some MOFs are made by design and some are not. And I'm so happy for that, because it allows us to go beyond our imagination, let nature help us sometimes with discovering structures that we have not imagined, such as MOF CO3. MOF CO3, which is a very important MOF, was not made by design. We just put the components together, but we didn't know it was going to make that specific structure. But it turns out that that structure is ideally suited for all weather conditions around the world. So I think you have to have an open mind between design and then being humble and letting nature teach you what it has to offer.
And I know your specialty is obviously in the design and crafting of the MOFs themselves, but there's a number of questions just about the device and the sense of how best to power such a device to enhance efficiency, maybe even with hydroelectric kind of power. Can you comment on kind of what you have thought through in terms of the powering of a device to create water production out of MOFs?
Well, I think the numbers that I quoted in terms of cost per liter, they're really based on a solar farm that supplies, basically equipped with these, not this particular device, but this kind of technology that allows you to harvest water and then channel it to where it's needed. Based on those calculations, you can produce millions of liters, and then you can also bring down your cost down to 1 cent actually per liter. So that's so we're thinking more solar, but obviously you could use wind, you could use any other source wherever might be available, might be convenient in that locale.
Mm.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question. Just I know you and I have talked about the future of chemistry and what your vision is about the future of chemists. Is there a role for computational scientists in helping to make water harvesting via MOFs a greater reality?
Absolutely. I mean, I think let's just take an example. In MOF CO3, we know exactly what makes it a great water storage material because we've gone in there and we've analyzed exactly where the water molecules are located, all of them, even when the MOF is filled with water. That's a beautiful piece of work from my student Nikita. Um, Once you know that, now you can say to yourself, okay, I'm going to create a MOF in the image of MOF CO3, but with larger pores so that it can store even more water. So right now, this MOF takes up 40% of its weight in water. And a computational chemist could take that information and then simulate and calculate structures that take that replica, but in different arrangement so that the pores are a little bit larger. And if they are, it makes a huge difference. All the costs that I just showed, that I was sharing with you, would be cut in half immediately. Okay, still operating under those weather conditions that I discussed, the extreme conditions as well as the normal conditions.
I've always wanted to ask this question. So you've talked about using the moss for water production in very dry, arid areas. But we see everybody has now solar panels that are taking them off the grid of PG&E. Could you ever foresee an urban application of MOF to produce water so that we could unplug from East Bay mud?
That's my vision, right? I showed you a device that works on no power except sunlight. Mm-hmm. Okay, now you can imagine a box sitting out in a corner in your house and modulating between day and night. And for every cycle, you're getting that much water per amount of MOF that you're using. Absolutely no maintenance, no power requirements, right? So I would say that is a very important development because it puts water off grid completely, right? But short of that, if you really, we are all impatient, we want lots of stuff now, then you plug into your solar panel and you can deliver water. Okay, I mean that's if your your solar panel is off grid. Okay, so is your water, right? But it's connected to the solar power. But we have that other solution, which is the completely passive device that works on the day and night cycle. So that's another option that we are developing.
Let me just ask this last question, which is, I mean, where do you hope the study of MOFs goes? And in that same vein, how would someone venture down into a career in some sense of developing and leveraging MOFs?
I think what I stumbled through at the beginning of my talk with the old materials and the new materials, what I was really trying to say is that in the whole human history, there has never been a class of materials that took everything that nature has given us and figured out a way to make new materials out of that. So to me, I can't see any other class of materials as extensive as MOFs. So MOFs are here to stay. And for the last 25 years, since our initial discovery, there has been tremendous intellectual advances, not just in making the materials, but in also covering the entire periodic table. Almost the entire periodic table is now being used to make MOFs and COFs. Okay, so we're talking about new compositions, new structures, but also new applications. And so let's talk just very briefly about the intellectual advances. If a student is really interested in what is the future of MOFs and whether there's a career in MOFs. aside from the fact that they are going to be able to address these vexing societal problems, these, I call them infrastructure problems, energy, water. If that's not enough, if you're just interested like me in just basic science, then you can think about designing structures, as we have recently found, that have sequences of chemical information that operate almost like a biological system, where depending on the sequence of these chemical information, you can design the code for very specific properties. These could be carbon capture and converting the carbon to a fuel, or they could be things that are much more sophisticated than that, such as sorting chemicals, sorting molecules, separating CO2 from water or water from air in a way that allows you to do it without input of energy. Okay, so the sequence, what I call sequence dependent materials, I think is yet another multi-varied domain that is yet to be exploited. And it's really there where the most exciting discoveries are being made today.
Well, that is fascinating, Omar. You never cease to amaze me, and I just want to thank you once again for joining us today and providing us this talk on the application of moss for water production. I want to thank you all that joined us today. We had a great number of people that joined. Please check us out again at ecosystems.berkeley.edu and register for future events, and also to access recording of past events.